this one. All right, guys. So let's just take a quick look at the schedule for the next few weeks in lab and kind of what the schedule for what we're doing in lab, as well as what the quizzes are. Okay, so so we're right here, right? We're in week the week of October 12th, which is week 9. So today we're going to talk about the muscles of the upper body in the cat. Okay, that'll be our second to last synchronous session in lab. And then you just did the quiz on the human lower body muscles. Okay, next week, the week of October 19th, the lab will be a muscle physiology lab. So it'll be lab 2 of 2 of the ones that are just like an online lab where you just complete some worksheets, you do answer some questions and turn it in. Okay, so that's the second one out of the 2 that we'll do. So that'll post on Monday morning at 8 a.m. and then you have the whole week to complete that. Okay, so just make sure you complete it and turn it in. You can resubmit it multiple times if you need to, but you will have to redo all of it if you do that. So I would just recommend maybe filling it, keeping track of your answers on a Word document or something. On the side, it'll save them, but if you want to just go change one thing or something later, then it would be kind of a pain to put it all back in if you didn't have it written down somewhere. So so I would kind of keep track of that somewhere on your computer. And then, but the quiz next week is of the first quiz on the upper body muscles in the cat. Okay, so we'll have 2 different quizzes on the upper body muscles in the cat, and I'll show you in the handout soon which ones those will be on. Okay, and you also get an announcement on Monday of each week telling you what each one will be on. Okay, and then after that, we come back for our last synchronous lab. I'll do more of a little bit more of a walkthrough with the human upper extremity and abdominal muscles and neck muscles. There's no quiz that week. Okay, and then we move into 2 more asynchronous labs where we have the November 2nd week. We'll do muscles of the second upper body cat muscles quiz. Okay, and that's mostly the muscles of the forearm. And then lastly, the week of November 9th, we'll do all the human upper body muscles, which includes the abdominal muscles and the neck as well. And then finally, the week of November 16th is the muscle practical, and then we're done with lab after that. Okay, so we've only got 1 more synchronous lab for the semester, and that's the week of October 26th. Okay, so any questions on that schedule? Okay, so let's take a quick look here. I'm going to just kind of walk us through a brief review of the human muscles here, lower extremity muscles, ones you just took a quiz on, and what I'd like us to do, what I'd like you guys to do, and is go ahead and I'm going to have you send in some answers to some questions on the chat. Okay, so it'll be kind of a thing where you send in everybody sends in their answer at the same time. Okay, so let's take a look at these gluteal muscles, and I want to start out by talking about different groups of muscles that are kind of tricky because there's multiple layers. Okay, so the gluteal muscles are that way, the adductor muscles are that way, and sometimes it's hard to tell which ones have been removed, which ones haven't. And so I just want to kind of give you a couple tips on how to do that and kind of quiz you a little bit on it here. Okay, so with these gluteal muscles, first of all, just on the chat, go ahead and send in the name of the muscle that's labeled A there. Okay, good. Looks like mostly everybody is saying gluteus medius. Okay, that's absolutely right. And then just send in the letter of the muscle, the letter of the muscle on the right hand image that is also gluteus medius. Just 1 letter, put it in. Good, good. Yeah, so pretty much everybody's saying E. Okay, so one of the important things about knowing the gluteal muscles is just kind of being able to visualize where they originate. Okay, so gluteus medius originates almost at the top of the iliac bone, almost to the iliac crest, right? So it's way up there. If you get an image like this, whereas the gluteus medius and maximus is not there, this one almost looks like gluteus medius, right? But you know it's not because it doesn't originate up here. Okay, gluteus medius has to originate high up on the iliac crest, whereas gluteus minimus is about halfway down the iliac bone. Okay, so when you get an image like this one here on the right side of that pelvis, a lot of times people will jump to gluteus medius because it kind of looks like gluteus medius, but that's where you do need to be familiar with the origin of the muscle, right? Okay, so that's an important one. And then go ahead and send in the letter to this question here. Which letter is gluteus maximus on the image on the right? Good. So pretty easy. Everybody's saying D. Absolutely. So you'll see gluteus maximus has a very different origin than the other ones, right? Most of it's on the sacrum over here, but then some of it's on the kind of posterior part of the iliac bone. Okay, and then it kind of wraps around the hip in a different way, whereas the other two kind of comes almost straight down from the pelvis, whereas gluteus maximus has this kind of wraparound effect to it. And so when it's cut, you can kind of see it there. Yeah, so we've got gluteus medius, gluteus maximus, minimus, and then same thing, max, medius, minimus. Okay, so you just want to be familiar with their origins in general, so you can kind of identify them when some of them have been removed, because it's not always going to say it like this, where it tells you which one is cut and which one isn't, right? Sometimes you might get an image like this one where you can't see the ones that have been cut. Okay, so questions on that? Okay, good. All right, so let's talk about the hip adductors. The hip adductors are definitely a bit trickier here. And this was one that, yeah, we'll come back to what I was about to say in one sec. But so take a look at these two images here, okay? And then what I want you to answer this question right here. So which muscles are present on the left-hand image? So this one, left, okay, but not the right, okay? So yeah, there's, yeah, so why don't you just send in the one that actually has adductor, not even that, yeah, never mind. Just send in, there's two of them that I'm thinking of right now. You might find another one, but send in more than one if there are of the muscles that are present in the picture on the left, but not on the right. Okay, peer pressure, peer pressure. Peer pressure is not good. Not in this case. So you guys are saying that adductor brevis is present in the picture on the left, but not on the right? Is that what you're saying? You understood the question? Okay. So let me show you something. So right here, thank you, Caitlin. Caitlin got it. Caitlin got it. So which muscle originates right there that I circled? Send in that one on the chat. Yes, absolutely. Okay. All right. And so which one, send in the letter of the one on the chat that is that on the left-hand image. Which one is pectineus on the left-hand side? Yeah, we got it, right? So that's something you got to be able to recognize, right? Because you can't really see the other adductor muscles when pectineus is there. So a lot of times the images that you'll see of the adductors has pectineus removed. And you may see a little stub of a muscle like you do on this side, but you may not, okay? So you've got to be able to recognize when pectineus is there and when it's not, okay? So, all right, so that's, yeah, so since a lot of you were saying that adductor brevis is not present on the left-hand image, take a closer look at that and send in the letter of the one on the left-hand image that is adductor brevis. Good, absolutely, it's B, right? Okay, so yeah, so we've got A there is pectineus, B is adductor brevis, C is adductor longus, okay? There's one on that side that's not, isn't labeled, okay? We can see a little bit of it right here on top, and we can see some of it down there on bottom. Which letter is it on the right-hand side for that muscle? That one's labeled on the right-hand side, thank you, yep. A lot of you are saying G, okay? And that was the one that you asked me about, Caleb, the one on the quiz you just took, there was a star up here, right? And then there was a star down here too, because adductor magnus goes all the way behind all of the adductor muscles. It's the most posterior adductor muscle, and it goes behind all of those. And that's why That's why you saw it with those two different stars there. Okay. All right, so then we see gracilis there. Gracilis was another one that's on the left and not on the right, but that wasn't, I was more interested in you figuring out the pectineus one because that's the trickier part. Okay, so, but then a lot of times when we're looking at an image, when we're trying to see all the adductors, a lot of times that pectineus is removed and you'll get an image that looks like the one on the right-hand side, right? And then it's, yeah, so then we can see brevis, longus, and magnus that way, okay? What I would say is this, memorize the order from superior to inferior, right? So we've got pectineus, the most superior. We've got brevis, we've got longus, and maybe you want to say magnus is the furthest one down, but don't let that trip you up because it's also that there's that little piece of it up here as well, okay? So however you want to remember that, but this might be something, I'm sure you guys can come up with something funny that sticks in your brain that's something for PBLM. Okay, I'm not sure what that would be, but if you think of something, email it to me. Okay, so that's what I would do. Superior to inferior, just remember that order. Okay, but then you've got to recognize when pectineus is gone, when it's not there, because you're gonna have some images without pectineus there because you just can't see the adductors quite as well with it there. Okay. All right. Questions on that? All right. Okay, so let's take a look at these lower leg muscles. These are pretty simple because you only have to know 3 of them. Well, there's 5 total, but the 2 calf muscles are pretty simple. But the 3 kind of tricky ones are the ones in the lateral compartment. Okay, so go ahead and you've got the same 3 muscles on either image. One is from an anterior view here, and then one is from the lateral view here. Okay, so maybe just in your heads, match up the letters, right? So like, which one does D match up with on the right side? Which one does F match up with on the right side? Which one does E match up with on the right side? And then why don't you send in the 2 letters that are the muscle that would extend the toes? That's just like a test question, right? Exactly how I would ask it. Not with 2 images, but the part about the extended toes. Good, so we're saying B and we're saying E for the most part. Good, absolutely. Yeah, that's extensor digitorum longus, right? Okay, so this one's about order too. I would memorize the order from the tibia. So if you have an anterior view like this one, right here, then we can see the tibia, right? Then we just work our way lateral. First one you're gonna get to, it's gonna be tibialis anterior, right? Okay, second one we get to is extensor digitorum longus. Don't abbreviate them on the quiz. I'm just doing that for time's sake right now. Okay, and then the third one you get to is always going to be fibularis longus. Okay, so same thing here. Tibialis anterior, extensor digitorum longus, fibularis longus. Okay, another tip on fibularis longus is follow it down, follow the tendon down. Notice that it goes posterior to the lateral malleolus, okay? It's the only one of those 3 that actually goes posterior to the lateral malleolus, and that makes it a plantar flexor, okay? Anything that goes behind or posterior to the lateral malleolus or medial malleolus is a plantar flexor. Anything that goes anterior to it is a dorsiflexor, okay? That's our axis of rotation for plantar flexion and dorsiflexion, okay? So just if you're kind of getting tripped up by the extensor digitorum longus, you're not sure which one is fibularis longus, follow the tendon down. You'll see that it goes down, it splits into 4 separate tendons. That one's unique. And it also goes anterior, whereas fibularis longus stays as one tendon and it goes posterior to the lateral malleolus. Okay, we can also see a little bit of soleus right here, right? That's this one. Okay, and then we can obviously see gastrocnemius there too. Okay, questions on that one? Okay. All right. Okay, let's look at the hamstring muscles. What I would say with these is memorize the order from lateral to medial. Okay, so we've got biceps femoris is most lateral, right? And then the one in the middle is tendinosus, And then the most medial one is membranosus. Okay, so we can see that biceps femoris, tendinosus, membranosus. Okay, so membranosus, M, medial, maybe that will help you. And that's it. Okay, my face is so washed out. Let me turn on the light behind me real quick. It's getting dark in here. Hold on a sec. Okay, that's better. All right, so yeah, so that's the posterior thigh. Anterior thigh, one I want to give recognition to here first is the iliopsoas muscle, right? The iliopsoas is made up of two separate muscles that come together, right? It's the iliacus and the psoas major. You don't have to know those two muscles individually, but that's why it looks like two muscles, because it is, right? That's our primary hip flexor muscle, right? That's our strongest hip flexor, okay? And yes, just wanted to point out that one. And then again, for the quads, I would say memorize those lateral to medial, okay? So the most lateral is going to be vastus lateralis, right? So that's there. And then we hit rectus femoris next, and then we have vastus medialis here, right? So lateralis, medialis. And then we always have the one underneath rectus femoris, which would be vastus intermedius. And that's another one you got to be aware of. If it looks like rectus femoris has been removed, then you're probably at vastus intermedius instead. And usually there will be kind of like a stub up here that you can see of rectus femoris. The other way to know is that rectus femoris overlaps on top of lateralis and medialis. So if you don't see a muscle that's kind of on top of those, then you know that's probably been removed.
Okay. So professor, for the practical,
yes,
is it going to be a mix? So it'll be a mix of cat and human, and then yes, a mix of cartoon and cadaver?
Yeah, so with the cat, there's no drawings for the cat muscles. That's all real pictures. But then for the humans, it's both. It's a mix of cadaver pictures and diagrams.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. And then just from the anterior view, you always want to make sure to remember you can see the tensor fasciae lata there, right? You can see sartorius right here. Okay, you can see gracilis. So all of these different muscles you can see from the anterior thigh view. Okay, any other questions for me on this stuff before we move on to the cat muscles?
For the muscle that's sort of towards the top and to the right of the sartorius, is that the pectineus? Or?
Yeah, so you can see a little bit of pectineus here. This is not a clear image of the adductors here at all. Okay. So I wouldn't be stressed out by trying to identify the adductors in that image, because I'm not 100% sure which one is which up there either. Okay, so
okay.
Typically, definitely sartorius is always going to be removed when you're looking at the adductors. Rectus femoris is always removed, and usually the quad muscles aren't there at all when you're looking at the adductors. So yeah, it's really hard to tell when you have an image like that. Okay, anything else? Okay, all right, so let me flip over to the lab handout, and then let's talk about the muscles here of the cat. Okay, so go ahead and open this up if you have this available. See how that's looking. Okay. All right, so we're going to start on page 11 in the handout. Okay, so we got up to page 10 last time, so starting on page 11, and we're going to start with the muscles of the shoulder in the cat. Okay, and one of the most important things to recognize with the cat images is the cat is not in anatomical position, right? The cat is like this. Okay, so right there, we're looking at the posterior side of the left shoulder of the cat, right? So the cat's like this, you're looking like this, and you can see this right here, right? That's what we're looking at, okay? So that's always first thing to recognize, okay? And then in the cat, we have two groups of muscles that are similar to the ones that humans have, but they're split up into 3 muscles each instead of 1 muscle each like it is in humans, okay? So the trapezius muscle in humans is the big one up here. We get knots in our traps all the time, right? Our upper traps. But there's kind of three portions of it. There's upper, middle, and lower in humans, but it's really one muscle. We can just activate different parts at different times. But in cats, it's three separate muscles. Same thing with the deltoids in the cats. Deltoids in humans are just one large muscle. Again, we can activate the anterior side, the lateral side, or the posterior side separately. But in cats, it's three separate muscles, okay? And they all have three names, the same three names in front of them, okay? So we have, for the trapezius ones, we have clavotrapezius. Clavo means, is referring to the clavicle, right? So that's always going to be the one that's highest up of the three. So clavotrapezius is kind of equivalent to our upper trapezius up in the neck, okay? Zoom in on that a little bit. And then we have acromiotrapezius right here. That's always going to be the middle one out of these. This is kind of the equivalent of our middle trap, which would be more of a scapular retractor. It would help us pull our scapula back like that. Okay, and then we have spinotrapezius. Okay, and spinotrapezius kind of has this angle to it like that. Okay, and so we got clavotrapezius, acromiotrapezius, spinotrapezius. Okay, same thing with the deltoids. Those are all directly in a row. We've got clavodeltoid, acromiodeltoid, and spinodeltoid. Okay, clavo is always the top one, closest to the clavicle. Acromio is coming off the acromion process, right? And so it's in the middle. And then spino is going to the spine, right? It's going from the shoulder to the spine, okay? So we got those three of each, okay? And then the other one here that I didn't, or two here that I didn't say yet, levator scapulae ventralis. That's this little guy right here. It kind of has a straight up angle instead of the other ones that kind of go different ways. It goes straight up. It's a thin little muscle. We have one that's in humans, almost the same, but it's called levator scapulae. There's no ventralis in the human muscle, okay? And then lastly, latissimus dorsi. That's the big wing-like muscle that is the exact same as you would find in a human. Okay, so that's the posterior shoulder. All right, let's move down to the deeper muscles in the posterior side, okay? So now with this image here on the left, we've removed, this is the anterior side now. This is an anterior view, okay? And now we're looking at the scapula down here, okay? So we're looking at the scapula like this, right? So here's the scapula. So we're looking at the muscles on this side of the scapula, this side of the scapula, okay? So if we're in this region right here, just throw in the chat real quick. Is that the anterior scapula or the posterior scapula? Anterior, posterior. Put it in. Where I drew those red squiggly lines. I can't tell. Thanks for your honesty. Okay. Yeah, so most people are saying anterior. And anterior is correct, okay? So so that's the side of the scapula that's up against the thorax, right? So it's got to be the anterior side because that's the side that's facing forward towards the thorax. This is the posterior side back here. Okay, this is anterior. Oops. Here, right? That would be the anterior side. Okay, and so.
Oh, is this a lateral view?
This is not a lateral view.
It's not? Okay.
This is an anterior view, but it's like this. So picture your arm like this. We're looking right here on the scapula, right? So if, do this with your own arm right now. Everybody do it. Hold your arm up, okay? And grab a hold of your scapula. It's kind of uncomfortable because you're grabbing your armpit, but it's okay. Feel free to grab your armpit. Okay, so hold it, and you can kind of grab a hold of your scapula, right? And if you're doing it, then your thumb is on the anterior side of your scapula, right? And your fingers are on the posterior side of your scapula. Okay, so that's right where we're looking. So on the anterior side of your scapula there, that's where your subscapularis is, right? That's the one of the four rotator cuff muscles that's on that side of the scapula. Okay, the other thing to think about, and I want you guys to do this too, find the spine of your scapula. Go ahead and do this, please. Find the spine of your scapula. And that's, right now, it's parallel to the ground, right? Nod your head yes if you're tracking with me. It's parallel to the ground, right? Okay. Now put yourself in the position that the cat's in. Okay. Come up like this. All the way up, higher up, because the cat's way up. Yeah, there you go. Okay. now what's the spine of the scapula doing? It's perpendicular to the ground now, right? Okay, so that's why this part right here on the posterior side, that's why that is where infraspinatus is. And then up here, which is now almost feels like more medial to the spine of the scapula, but it's still superior, that's where supraspinatus is. Okay, does that make sense? Because it's all about the position that the cat's in, right? The spine of the scapula went from being like this to when you went into flexion, it went like this, right? So that's an important thing just to recognize that that you're going to need to recognize with the cat.
And this is the left side of the cat?
This one is a left. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Okay, so we got that. We can see latissimus dorsi here again. We can see serratus ventralis in the cat. That's similar to our serratus anterior. Okay, it's right up on the ribs here. It grabs onto the scapula and pulls it up against your chest when you're pushing forward, or pulls it up against your thorax when you're pushing forward like that. Okay, in cats it's serratus ventralis, in humans serratus anterior. Okay, so that's what we can see there. Now let's go to this image here on the right. This one is now a posterior view of the scapula. Okay, but we've cut acromiotrapezius out of the way, right? We had to slice it to get underneath the scapula. Now again, we've got the anterior surface of the scapula right there, right? But now we're just looking at the back of it, okay? So that's subscapularis again, okay? And then if we were able to wrap around the posterior side of the scapula right here a little bit, that's where we would find supraspinatus, because that's the one right above the spine of the scapula on the posterior side. Okay, and then we can see our rhomboids here. Rhomboids are your primary retractor muscles. So when you pull back like this, when you're doing like a row and you're pinching your shoulder blades together, that's your rhomboids doing that. Okay, questions on those? Okay, all right, let's go down a little further. This is the last part of the chest. And so for the lab quiz, the first upper extremity lab quiz, it includes these muscles here on page 11, these ones here on page 12, and then these ones here on page 13. Okay, so that's for the first upper extremity one, which is next week. Okay, and then we have a bit of a break of quizzes, and then the second upper extremity one starts on this one here. Okay, on page 14. We'll look at those in a sec. Okay, so all we've got left here on the stuff for the first upper extremity quiz is this one, the anterior side. So now we're looking at the chest of the cat, right? We're looking at these muscles right here, okay? The cat has a unique muscle here that's not found in humans. It's just a little skinny one that's on top of the other ones. And so pectoralis major sits underneath it here, as well as up here a little bit. So this would be another one. We might see a star right here and right here, and you would know that that's pectoralis major. Okay, and then in cats, it's kind of like the gluteal muscles. Pectoralis minor is a much bigger muscle in cats than pectoralis major is. And that's the opposite of humans, okay? But just how the gluteus medius is larger than the maximus in cats. Okay, and then we can see the latissimus dorsi again right there. Okay? All right, questions on those before we move on to the forearm ones? All right, so then starting on page 14 here is the second set of upper extremity muscles in the cat. Just presenting them to you now to give you kind of my tips on how to study them, but you won't have a quiz on them for a couple weeks, okay? Yeah, so upper extremity quiz 2 here. And so I'm not gonna show you that top part there. So now I want you to send in the chat again. So remember the cat's like this, okay? So are we looking at the posterior side or the anterior side? Don't look at the top of your handout. Just try to do it by the picture. Send it in. Send it into the chat. Posterior or anterior. Is that the posterior or anterior forearm that we're looking at those muscles? Ooh, peer pressure reigns again. We had a couple sticking with, oh, now we're going back the other way. I like it. Cool. All right. So the cat, well, so how do we know? How do we know which side we're on, right? Well, one kind of tip for this, if you can't see the cat doesn't really have a thumb like we do, right? It doesn't, so that's not helpful. So you can't see a thumb sticking out, okay? We can see these tricep muscles, which are very different than what we see on the other side, okay? The triceps are going to be posterior, always like this, okay? So we can see those pretty clearly. They're just two large heads that we don't see that on the anterior side. On the anterior side, we would see those pectoralis muscles, right, instead. And so that's one kind of tip there. And then just to know that we can see the cat's head right here, okay? If the cat's head's right there, then we know that has to be the left. Well, actually, we don't know. That's not helpful. Yeah, I would go with the tricep. The triceps would be the helpful way to know, because you can see those triceps. Okay. All right. So we know we're on the posterior side now. The extensor muscles on humans and cats are right here. Okay. So we're looking at the cat like this, and we're looking at this side right here. Okay. Can you see my arm? I can't tell if you can see my arm, but okay. So we're looking right here on the cat. Okay. And so with the extensors and with the flexors, most of them kind of originate on the same spot. So most of the extensors originate on the lateral epicondyle in the humerus. Most of the flexors originate on the medial epicondyle of the humerus, okay? But so again, this is where I would recommend memorizing the order. You just got to memorize the order, okay? So start on the furthest this way, okay? And what is that? Is that medial or lateral? Throw it in there, M or L, throw it in the chat. What's this right here? Ooh, I'm seeing lots of M's. So the cat's like this, right? So which side is my thumb? Is my thumb always medial or is my thumb always lateral? My thumb's always lateral, right? So this is the radius side over here, right? So this is lateral because the cat's not in an anatomical position, right? The cat's not in an anatomical position. Its arms are up like this, right? So when my arm's up like this, my radius is closer to my head, right? And that's exactly what we're looking at with the cat. With the radius is closer to the head here. The thumb side is closer to the head. But anatomical position would be like this, right? With the thumb being outwards. Okay, so we're starting lateral. We start with this big, skinny, long one that sits off of the cat, which is brachioradialis, okay? We move in from there to the next one, which is this one with a 4-word name, extensor carpi radialis longus, okay? It has longus in its name because it originates further up than the other ones. It originates way up there, whereas all the other extensors originate on the lateral epicondyle. Okay, so we go brachioradialis, we go extensor carpi radialis longus. Next one we get to is a 3-word name, extensor digitorum communis. Okay, so that's the one that extends the fingers, right? Extends the fingers. Okay, we have the same one in humans, except we don't do the communis part. It's just called extensor digitorum. Okay, so now we got 3 like that, right? Because we had extensor digitorum longus in the leg. We have extensor digitorum in the forearm of the humans, and then we have extensor digitorum communis in the forearm of the cats. Okay, I know it's a lot to keep track of. Okay, and then we skip a muscle here, so that's important for when you're ordering, okay, because that's a cat muscle. And then we get to the one that's the furthest on the pinky side, which is extensor carpi ulnaris. Okay, I want everybody to feel their brachioradialis with me real quick. So hold your hand up like this, like you're going to shake someone's hand. We don't do that anymore now, post-COVID world. We don't shake hands, but if we did, you would put your hand like this, okay? And you just lift up like this, kind of lift your thumb up and then kind of do like a little bit of a bicep curl and feel right here. You should feel a muscle that pops up, right? It kind of pops up off of your arm, right? That one that lifts up, that's your brachioradialis, okay? So it sticks out just like the cat's does, right? You see the cat's brachioradialis sticking out there. Your brachioradialis does too. Okay, so lateral to medial, we go brachioradialis, extensor digitorum communis, or sorry, brachioradialis is 1, right? Extensor carpi radialis longus is 2, extensor digitorum communis is 3. We skip this cat muscle, that would be 4, and then extensor carpi ulnaris, that would be 5. Okay.
And the cat will always be shown like that.
It'll always be in that position, yeah. That
okay.
Always in that posture of being up like that, yeah. Okay, and then we see another one in here. Doesn't get much credit, but it's actually our strongest elbow flexor, which is called brachialis. Okay, it sits underneath the biceps brachii. Biceps brachii gets all the credit, but brachialis sits up underneath it, and it's the strongest of the elbow flexors, actually. Okay, so yeah, so those are the ones we can see there. And there's one more head of the triceps that we can't see here, right? We can see lateral head, long head, and there's the medial head, but it's underneath the other two. Okay, and then lastly, we're flipping over to the anterior side of the cat forearm now, right? So we're looking at side here, right? So we're looking at that side. We're gonna look at the flexor muscles, ones that are flexing the wrist like this, right? And there's really just 4 of them here. And then we'll add another with the biceps brachii. We can do that one first. So see how this one looks way different? This is how you can tell whether you're anterior or posterior, right? Biceps brachii is kind of this little shiny, skinny muscle there. We can always see this vein artery nerve bundle. That's where your brachial artery and brachial vein go through, okay? That looks a lot different than the triceps right there, right? So that's the way you can tell if you're on the anterior side or the posterior side. So anterior side's there, and then we can also see the pecs over here, which we wouldn't see on the posterior side. Okay, so let's start with the forearm flexor muscles. And instead of starting like lateral or medial like we did on the posterior side, I recommend starting right in the middle. So palmaris longus is our little tiny muscle we have in humans that we use the tendon for Tommy John surgery, right? But in cats, it's actually a really big, powerful muscle. All it does is tighten up your palm. But in cats, it's that big, shiny one in the middle. Okay, so we got palmaris longus in the middle. You guys hear the kids screaming? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, sorry. They're downstairs doing their post-dinner wrestle session, which happens every night. Yeah, so we got palmaris longus in the middle. And then if we go 1 to the pinky side, right here, that's flexor carpi ulnaris. And then we go 1 to the thumb side, flexor carpi radialis. That's the easiest way, I think. Find that palmaris longus in the middle. 1 to the pinky side, you're on the ulnaris. 1 to the thumb side, you're on the radialis. Okay, we can see brachioradialis again, and then we can see pronator teres. It's kind of an interesting muscle. Instead of all of the other forearm flexor muscles go straight down the forearm, right? Pronator teres takes an angle like this. It goes across the forearm from the medial epicondyle still, because when it comes across, it pulls into pronation, right? Because it's a pronator muscle. Okay, and that is it for the cat upper extremity muscles. Any questions I can answer? All right, guys. Well, hopefully this is a little bit helpful to give you just kind of an overview, give you some tips from my perspective on how to study these. And we'll do this one more time with the human muscles, not next week, but the week after. We'll have our last synchronous lab. Yeah, so that's all I got for you tonight. So hope you guys enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll see you tomorrow for the TBL day. Study those shoulder muscles hard.
Thank you, doctor.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Welcome.